Now that you became a millionaire with my dad's inheritance, you're going to support me and the kids?" my gold digger daughter-in-law demanded. I just nodded. The next day she showed up with her suitcases, the kids, and her mother. She fainted at what she found at the door. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I was still wearing my black dress from Harold's funeral when Brooklyn showed up at my door. 3 weeks had passed since I buried my husband of 42 years, and I was just beginning to understand what silence meant. The house felt enormous without his morning coffee routine, without his evening news commentary, without his gentle snoring that had lulled me to sleep for decades. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most of our friends had already paid their respects, bringing casseroles I couldn't stomach and condolences that felt hollow. When I opened the door, Brooklyn stood there with that practiced smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Hi, Mom." She'd been calling me that for 8 years, ever since she married my son David. The word always felt forced coming from her lips, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized but never believed in. Behind her stood my 2 grandchildren, Emma, 7, and little Jake, only 4. Emma clutched a worn stuffed rabbit while Jake hid behind his mother's designer jeans. And there, bringing up the rear like some kind of unwanted parade, was Brooklyn's mother, Diane, dragging a suitcase behind her. "Brooklyn." I stepped back, confused. "I wasn't expecting you." "Well, that's what I'm here to talk about." She pushed past me into the foyer, her heels clicking on Harold's cherished hardwood floors. "We need to have a serious conversation." I closed the door slowly, my heart already beginning to race. Something about her tone, her posture, the way she surveyed my living room like she was appraising it, sent warning bells through my mind. "Children, why don't you go play in the den?" Brooklyn said, her voice suddenly sweet as honey. "Grandma Phyllis and I need to talk grown-up things." Emma took Jake's hand and led him away. I heard the television turn on, the sound of cartoons filling the heavy silence Brooklyn had brought into my home. "Diane." I nodded to Brooklyn's mother, who had positioned herself by the window like she was standing guard. "Phyllis." Diane's voice was cold, formal. She'd never liked me, thought I was too common for her daughter's ambitions. The feeling was mutual. Brooklyn settled herself on Harold's favorite armchair without invitation. I remained standing, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. "So," Brooklyn began, crossing her legs and smoothing her skirt, "I know this is a difficult time for all of us. Losing David was." She paused, pressing her lips together in what I assumed was meant to look like grief. "It's been devastating." I waited. Brooklyn never said anything without an agenda. "But life goes on, and we have to be practical." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. "I've been going through David's things, and I found his copy of Harold's will." My blood went cold. Harold had updated his will just 6 months before his death, leaving everything to me. The house, the savings, the small inheritance from his father. We talked about it over dinner one night, how I'd be taken care of, how I could stay in our home for as long as I wanted. "Brooklyn, I don't understand what you're getting at." She opened the folder and pretended to scan the documents inside. "Well, it's quite substantial, isn't it? The house alone is worth what, 400,000? And then there's the savings accounts, the retirement funds." She looked up at me with those calculating blue eyes. "David always said you and Harold were more comfortable than you let on." "That's between Harold and me," I said quietly. "Was," Diane interjected from her post by the window, "was between you and Harold." Brooklyn shot her mother a look. Apparently that wasn't part of the script. "What Mom means is we're family. David's death affects all of us." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What exactly are you asking for, Brooklyn?" She leaned forward, and for the first time since she'd arrived, her mask slipped just slightly. I saw something hard and greedy in her expression, something that reminded me of a cat cornering a mouse. "I'm not asking, Mom. I'm telling you what's going to happen." Her voice was still sweet, but there was steel underneath it now. "You're going to support me and the children. We're moving in here." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Excuse me." "You heard me." Brooklyn stood up, smoothing her skirt again. "David is gone. I'm a single mother now with 2 children to raise. I can't work full-time and take care of them properly. And you. She gestured around the room, at the comfortable furniture Harold and I had saved years to buy, at the family photos covering every surface. You have all this space, all this money, and you're all alone. Brooklyn, this is my home. It's a 5-bedroom house, Phyllis. Way too big for one person. She walked to the mantelpiece and picked up a photo of Harold and me from our wedding day. David would have wanted his children to be comfortable. He would have wanted his wife to be taken care of. I wanted to scream that David would have wanted no such thing, that my son had confided in me more than once about Brooklyn's spending habits, her demands, her constant need for more. But the children were in the next room, and despite everything, they were still my grandchildren. I need time to think about this, I said. No. The word came out sharp, final. You don't get to think about it. We're family, and family takes care of each other. Unless. She set the photo down and turned to face me fully. Unless you want me to tell Emma and Jake that their grandmother doesn't want to help them. That she'd rather live alone in her big house while they struggle. The threat was clear. She would poison my grandchildren against me, turn them into weapons in whatever game she was playing. Diane cleared her throat. We brought our things, she said, gesturing toward the suitcases by the door that I was just now noticing. We figured it would be easier to move in today rather than drag this out. I stared at them both. These two women who had just invaded my home and my life with the casual cruelty of people who had never been told no. Brooklyn was watching me with that predatory smile again, waiting for my response. Please, Mom, she said, her voice suddenly soft and pleading. We need you. The children need stability. David would have wanted this. I looked toward the den where Emma and Jake were watching cartoons, completely unaware that their mother was using them as leverage in some twisted negotiation. They had lost their father just 3 weeks ago. They were grieving, confused, probably scared about what would happen to them now. All right, I heard myself say. You can stay. Brooklyn's smile widened into something triumphant. I knew you'd do the right thing. But as I watched her walk back to the foyer to collect her suitcases, as I saw Diane nod approvingly like she'd just witnessed a successful business transaction, I felt something shift inside me. Something cold and calculating that I'd never known I possessed. They thought I was just a lonely old woman, easily manipulated by guilt and threats. They had no idea what they'd just walked into. I was about to teach them both a lesson they'd never forget. Within 48 hours, Brooklyn had completely transformed my home into her personal kingdom. I watched from the kitchen window as she directed a moving truck, having somehow arranged for the rest of her belongings to arrive without consulting me first. Box after box of her things poured into my house, expensive furniture, artwork I'd never seen before, enough clothes to stock a small boutique. Mom, we need to talk about the room situation, Brooklyn announced, appearing in the kitchen doorway with a clipboard in her hand. She'd appointed herself household manager, apparently. I was making breakfast for Emma and Jake, scrambling eggs the way Harold used to like them. The children had been quiet since arriving, staying close to each other and speaking in whispers. Emma kept asking when they were going home, and Brooklyn kept telling her this was home now. What about the rooms? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. Well, obviously the children need the bigger bedrooms upstairs. The master suite has that lovely ensuite bathroom that Mom really needs. She gestured toward the ceiling where Diane was currently rearranging what had been Harold's study. And I'll need the guest room and the sewing room for my office space and walk-in closet. I turned slowly from the stove. And where exactly am I supposed to sleep? Brooklyn's smile was razor sharp. There's that lovely small bedroom at the end of the hall. The one you use for storage? It'll be cozy. Perfect for someone your age who doesn't need much space. The storage room. She wanted me to sleep in a 10 by 12 room that had been used for Harold's old golf equipment and my Christmas decorations. In my own house. Brooklyn, that room doesn't even have a proper closet. Oh, but you don't have that many clothes anyway, she said dismissively. And really at your age, do you need a huge closet? It's better to downsize, don't you think? I looked at this woman who had been married to my son for 8 years, who had eaten at my table every Christmas and Thanksgiving, who had smiled and called me Mom while planning God knows what behind my back. The audacity was breathtaking. I suppose I could make it work temporarily, I said. Perfect. Brooklyn made a check mark on her clipboard. Oh, and we'll need to discuss the household budget. I've been looking at your expenses. and there's definitely room for improvement. My expenses. In my own home. Improvement how? Well, you've been wasting money on organic groceries when regular food is perfectly fine. And this house is way too warm, we need to lower the thermostat. Utility bills are outrageous. She flipped through pages on her clipboard like she was conducting a business audit. And honestly, do you really need a cleaning lady at your age? It would be good exercise for you to do your own housework. I thought about Maria, who had been cleaning my house every other week for 12 years. Maria, whose granddaughter I'd helped put through college. Maria, who brought me soup when I was sick and who cried with me at Harold's funeral. Maria isn't just a cleaning lady. She's family. Brooklyn's expression hardened slightly. Well, she's not really family, is she? She's an employee. And employees cost money. Money that could be better spent on the children's needs. Before I could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway. Grandma Phyllis, where did all your pictures go? I felt my heart stop. What pictures, sweetheart? The ones on the walls. In the living room. All the pictures of you and Grandpa Harold. I rushed to the living room with Emma trailing behind me. The walls were bare. Every single photograph of Harold and me, our wedding pictures, vacation photos, family gatherings spanning 4 decades, had been removed. In their place, Brooklyn had hung her own artwork. Modern pieces that looked cold and impersonal. Where are my photographs? I asked, my voice barely controlled. Brooklyn emerged from the dining room, where she'd been rearranging my china cabinet. Oh, those old things? They're in the basement. I thought it would be healthier for you to move forward instead of dwelling on the past. Those weren't old things. They were my memories. And now you can make new memories with us, she said brightly, as if she'd just done me an enormous favor. It's important to live in the present, don't you think? I stared at the blank spaces where my life with Harold used to hang. 42 years of marriage, reduced to empty walls because Brooklyn thought my memories were unhealthy. Mom, Diane called from upstairs. Where do you keep the good linens? These sheets in the master bedroom are practically threadbare. Those sheets had been a wedding gift from Harold's mother. We'd saved them for special occasions, sleeping on them only on anniversaries and holidays. They were Egyptian cotton, beautifully embroidered, worth more than anything in this house. I'll show you, Brooklyn called back, already heading for the stairs. And Mom, we'll need to go shopping for some decent furniture. Most of what you have is so outdated. I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by my grandchildren's toys scattered across Harold's pristine hardwood floors, looking at walls that no longer contained any evidence of my existence. The house smelled different already. Brooklyn's expensive perfume had replaced the subtle scent of Harold's aftershave that I'd been clinging to since his death. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Grandma, why is Mommy moving all your things? I knelt down to her level, smoothing her dark hair away from her face. She had David's eyes, gentle and concerned. Sometimes grown-ups have to make changes, sweetheart. But this is your house, she said with the simple logic of a 7-year-old. Daddy said this was your house. Before I could answer, Brooklyn's voice carried down from upstairs. Emma, come up here and see your new room. Emma hesitated, looking between me and the stairs. Can you come see it too, Grandma? In a little while, I said. You go ahead. I watched her climb the stairs, her small feet making barely any sound on the steps. Harold had refinished himself just 2 years ago. Then I walked to my kitchen, the one room Brooklyn hadn't yet claimed, and sat at the table where Harold and I had shared breakfast every morning for decades. The sound of boxes being moved, furniture scraping across floors, and Brooklyn's voice directing the chaos filled my house. She was nesting, making herself comfortable, establishing dominance in every room. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She thought I was weak, thought I was just a grieving widow who could be pushed around and controlled. She had no idea that I'd spent 42 years managing household budgets, navigating family politics, and solving problems without making a fuss. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone. Time to make some calls. First I called my lawyer, then my accountant, then my brother in Chicago, who'd been waiting for me to ask for help since Harold's funeral. Brooklyn wanted to play house with my life? Perfect. I'd let her get comfortable, let her think she'd won. Then I'd show her what a real fight looked like. It was Emma who first mentioned Uncle Ryan. I was making dinner my third night, cooking for 5 people instead of 1. when she casually dropped the name that would change everything. "Grandma Phyllis, will Uncle Ryan come visit us here?" she asked, carefully coloring a butterfly in her coloring book at the kitchen table. I paused, my hand frozen over the pot of spaghetti sauce. "Uncle Ryan? Sweetheart, I don't know any Uncle Ryan." Emma looked up with those innocent dark eyes. "Mommy's friend. He used to come over a lot when Daddy was at work. He brought us presents and played games with us." The wooden spoon slipped from my hand, clattering against the edge of the pot. "He came over while your daddy was at work?" "Uh-huh. Mommy said he was our special uncle, but not to tell Daddy because it would hurt his feelings." Emma went back to her coloring, completely unaware of the bomb she just dropped. "He has a really nice car. Red like a fire truck." I felt the blood drain from my face. David had worked long hours at the insurance company, often staying late to finish reports. He'd mentioned coming home to find Brooklyn freshly showered, mentioning that she'd had lunch with friends or gone shopping. He'd never suspected anything. "Emma, honey," I said carefully, "how long has Uncle Ryan been coming to visit?" She scrunched up her face, thinking. "A really long time. Since before Jake could walk good." Jake was 4 now. Before he could walk meant at least 3 years. 3 years of this Uncle Ryan visiting my daughter-in-law, while my son was working to support his family. "Did Uncle Ryan ever stay for dinner?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Sometimes. And sometimes he stayed really late. Mommy said he was helping her with grown-up stuff." Emma selected a purple crayon. "He made Mommy laugh a lot. She didn't laugh much when Daddy was home." The spaghetti sauce started to bubble over, but I couldn't move. I stood there gripping the counter, trying to process what my 7-year-old granddaughter had just revealed. Brooklyn had been having an affair. For years. In the house my son had worked himself to exhaustion to provide. "What are we talking about in here?" Brooklyn's voice came from the doorway, bright and cheerful. Emma looked up excitedly. "I was telling Grandma about Uncle Ryan. She doesn't know him." The color drained from Brooklyn's face so fast I thought she might faint. Her eyes darted between Emma and me, and I saw the exact moment she realized what had happened. "Emma, why don't you go upstairs and wash your hands for dinner?" Brooklyn's voice was strained. "But I'm not done coloring." "Now, Emma." My granddaughter gathered her crayons with a confused expression and left the kitchen. The moment her footsteps faded up the stairs, Brooklyn turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Gone was the sweet mask, the fake smile, the pretense of caring. What I saw now was cold calculation and barely contained panic. "I can explain," she said. "Can you?" I turned off the burner and faced her fully. "Can you explain why my son's children know about Uncle Ryan but my son never did?" Brooklyn's jaw tightened. "It's not what you think. What I think is that you were cheating on my son. What I think is that while David was working 16-hour days to keep you in designer clothes and that house you insisted you needed, you were entertaining another man." "David didn't understand me," she said. And there it was, the classic excuse of every cheating spouse. "He was always working, always tired." Ryan gave me emotional support. Emotional support. I repeated the words like they tasted bitter. "Is that what you call it?" Brooklyn stepped closer, and I saw something dangerous in her eyes. "You don't know what it was like being married to your precious David. He was boring, Phyllis. Predictable. He never wanted to do anything fun. Never wanted to travel or take risks." Ryan understood me. The casual cruelty in her voice took my breath away. This was how she spoke about my son, the father of her children, 3 weeks after his funeral. "David loved you," I said quietly. "David loved the idea of me. He wanted a wife who would be happy staying home, cooking dinner, playing house. That's not who I am." She crossed her arms, defiant now. "Ryan knows who I really am." "And who is that, Brooklyn? Someone who lies to her husband? Someone who teaches her children to keep secrets? Someone who isn't willing to settle for a boring life?" she snapped. "Someone who deserves more than being married to a small-town insurance agent who thinks dinner at Olive Garden is fancy." I felt something cold settle in my chest. This woman had been married to my son for 8 years. She'd stood at his deathbed, cried at his funeral, accepted sympathy from friends and family. And she'd never loved him. Not really. "Where is Ryan now?" I asked. For the first time, Brooklyn looked uncomfortable. He's figuring things out. What does that mean? It means his wife found out about us. She's being difficult about the divorce. His wife, of course. Uncle Ryan was married too, with his own family that he was destroying. So he threw you away when things got complicated, I said. Brooklyn's face flushed red. He didn't throw me away. We're working through some logistics. He'll come around once. Once what? Once you have access to David's inheritance through me. The pieces were falling into place now. This whole thing, moving in here, demanding that I support you, it's not about the children, is it? It's about having money to wait for your married boyfriend to decide if you're worth the trouble. You don't know what you're talking about. But I could see the truth in her eyes. She'd counted on David's life insurance, but there hadn't been much. She'd counted on him having savings, but he'd spent everything trying to keep up with her demands. The only real money was Harold's inheritance, and the only way to get to it was through me. How much debt are you in, Brooklyn? That's none of your business. It is when you're living in my house and demanding that I pay your expenses. I stepped closer. How much? She looked away, her jaw working like she was chewing on words she didn't want to say. Brooklyn, how much debt? $50,000, she whispered. $50,000. No wonder she'd been so desperate to move in here, so quick to claim ownership of my life. Credit cards? I asked. She shook her head, still not meeting my eyes. What then? Gambling. The word hit me like a slap. Gambling. Ryan and we went to the casino sometimes. I had a system. I was winning for a while, but then... She shrugged like she was talking about a bad hair day instead of financial ruin. I thought about David working late nights and weekends, worried about the mortgage payments and the children's future. I thought about the life insurance policy he'd struggled to afford, thinking he was protecting his family, all while his wife was gambling away their security with her boyfriend. Does Ryan know about the debt? I asked. Brooklyn's silence was answer enough. He doesn't, does he? You never told him. He thinks you're this sophisticated woman with money, and you've been lying to him too. I can fix this, Brooklyn said quickly. I just need time. And I need... She gestured around the kitchen. At my house, my life. I need stability while I figure it out. What you need is to face the consequences of your choices. I have children to think about. You should have thought about them before you started gambling away their future. Brooklyn's composure finally cracked completely. You think you're so perfect, don't you? The grieving widow, the devoted mother. But you don't know anything about real life, about real problems. You've been sitting in this house for 40 years playing the good little wife while the world passed you by. I looked at this woman who had destroyed my son's happiness, who had gambled away his children's security, who was now trying to use me to fix her mistakes. The rage I felt was so pure, so clean that it almost surprised me. You're right, I said calmly. I don't know anything about gambling away my children's future. I don't know anything about cheating on my husband. And I certainly don't know anything about being $50,000 in debt, while demanding that someone else solve my problems. Brooklyn opened her mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. But I do know something about consequences. And yours are about to begin. As if summoned by our raised voices, little Jake appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Mommy? Why are you yelling? Brooklyn immediately switched back to her mother voice, all sweetness and light. We're not yelling, baby. Mommy and Grandma were just talking about grown-up things. I watched her scoop him up, watched her kiss his forehead and smooth his hair. These children had no idea what kind of mother they had. They had no idea that their father had died never knowing the truth about his marriage. But they were about to learn what kind of grandmother they had. And Brooklyn was about to discover that this old woman knew a few things about playing games too. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I left the house before 7 a.m. without telling anyone where I was going. Brooklyn and her mother were still asleep, exhausted from their efforts to redecorate my life. The children were curled up together in Emma's new room, and I kissed each of their foreheads before slipping out the back door. My first stop was the office of James Morrison, the private investigator my brother had recommended. James was a retired police detective, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and calloused hands who listened to my story without judgment. Mrs. Henderson, he said when I finished speaking. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here? I want to know the truth about my daughter-in-law. All of it. I sat straighter in the worn leather chair across from his desk. I want to know about this Ryan person, about her debts, about anything else she's been hiding. James nodded slowly. That's understandable. But I have to ask, are you prepared for what we might find? Sometimes the truth is worse than we imagine. I thought about Emma's innocent mention of Uncle Ryan, about Brooklyn's casual dismissal of my son's memory, about the $50,000 in gambling debt she'd accumulated while David worked himself to exhaustion. Mr. Morrison, 3 weeks ago I buried my son. I thought I knew the woman he married, thought I understood their relationship. Now I'm learning that nothing I believed was true. I leaned forward. Whatever you find can't be worse than discovering that my son died never knowing who he really married. James picked up a pen and pulled out a yellow legal pad. Tell me everything you know about Ryan. I repeated Emma's description, the red car, the frequent visits during David's work hours, the presents and games. James took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. What about Brooklyn's mother? Diane, you said. She's living in my house now too. Has been since Brooklyn moved in. She knew about the affair, I'm certain of that. The way she looked at me when Brooklyn was talking, like she was in on some secret joke. Financial history? Credit reports. That's where I need your help. Brooklyn mentioned $50,000 in gambling debt, but I suspect there's more she hasn't told me. James set down his pen. Mrs. Henderson, investigations like this take time. And they're not cheap. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I thought about Harold's insurance money sitting in my account, about the house he'd left me free and clear, about the comfortable retirement he'd planned for us that was now just for me. Harold always said that the truth was worth paying for, even when it hurt. I opened my purse and pulled out my checkbook. How much do you need to get started? 2 hours later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office. Patricia Chun had handled Harold's will, and had known our family for 15 years. She was sharp, thorough, and had the kind of no-nonsense attitude that Brooklyn wouldn't be expecting. Phyllis, I have to say, I'm concerned about this living situation, Patricia said, reviewing the notes I'd given her about Brooklyn's demands. You have no legal obligation to support your daughter-in-law. None whatsoever. But the children. The children are a different matter. If Brooklyn can't provide for them, there are other options. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Tell me about this gambling debt. I repeated what Brooklyn had told me about the $50,000, about Ryan, about the casino visits. Patricia's expression grew more serious with each detail. Phyllis, if what you're telling me is true, Brooklyn could lose custody of those children. Gambling addiction, infidelity, financial irresponsibility. Family court judges don't look kindly on that combination. Something clicked into place in my mind. What would happen to Emma and Jake if Brooklyn lost custody? Well, the father is deceased. If there are no other relatives. Patricia consulted her computer screen. You could petition for custody. As their paternal grandmother, you'd have a strong case, especially if you can demonstrate that Brooklyn is unfit. I sat back in my chair, the weight of possibility settling over me. Those children, David's children, could be safe. Really safe, not just temporarily protected while Brooklyn figured out her next scheme. What would I need to prove? Patricia pulled out a fresh legal pad. Evidence of the gambling problem. Documentation of the debt. Proof of the infidelity if possible. Character witnesses who can testify to Brooklyn's fitness as a mother. She looked up at me. It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be quick. Family court moves slowly. But it's possible. It's possible. Especially if Brooklyn continues to make poor choices. I left Patricia's office with a folder full of papers and a clearer sense of purpose than I'd felt since Harold's death. This wasn't just about protecting myself from Brooklyn's schemes anymore. This was about protecting Emma and Jake from the chaos their mother was creating. My third stop was the bank where Harold and I had done business for 25 years. I needed to understand exactly what resources I had available, and I needed to make sure Brooklyn couldn't access any of them. Carol, the branch manager, had sent flowers to Harold's funeral. She welcomed me into her office with genuine sympathy, and listened carefully as I explained my situation. The good news is that all your accounts are solely in your name now, Carol said, pulling up my financial information on her computer. Brooklyn has no legal access to any of your money. But if she's living in my house, using my utilities, eating my groceries, that's your choice to allow. But she can't force you to give her money directly. Carol frowned at something on her screen. Phyllis, has anyone else been asking about your accounts recently? What do you mean? We had a call last week. Someone claiming to be your daughter-in-law, asking about your balance and whether you had any other accounts at different banks. Carol's frown deepened. Of course, we didn't give out any information. But it was unusual. My blood ran cold. Brooklyn had been investigating my finances, trying to figure out exactly how much money she could get her hands on. Did she give a name? Brooklyn Henderson. She said she was helping you manage your affairs after your husband's death. She's not. She has no authority to access any information about my accounts. Carol made notes on my file. I'll make sure all our staff know that. Is there anything else you'd like me to do? I thought for a moment. Yes. I want to set up a separate account. Something completely private. And I want to make some changes to my will. By the time I returned home that afternoon, I felt like a different person. For the first time since Harold's death, I had a plan. More than that, I had hope. Brooklyn was in the living room when I walked in, surrounded by papers and talking on her phone in hushed tones. She looked up when she heard the door, and I saw a flash of something: guilt? Fear? Cross her face before she forced a smile. I have to go, she said into the phone. We'll talk later. She hung up and turned to me with fake brightness. There you are. I was starting to worry. Were you? I set down my purse and looked at the papers scattered around her. What are you working on? Oh, just some family business. Trying to get David's affairs in order. She started gathering the papers, but not before I caught a glimpse of what looked like credit card statements. Anything I can help with? No. It's all very boring stuff. Brooklyn stuffed the papers into a folder. Where were you all day? I made lunch, but you weren't here. I had some errands to run. Adult errands. I used her own phrase from the day before, and I saw her eyes narrow slightly. What kind of errands? Personal business. I walked toward the kitchen, then paused and turned back. Brooklyn, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About Uncle Ryan. Her face went pale. What about him? I think you should call him. Invite him for dinner. I'd like to meet this man who's been such a big part of the children's lives. Brooklyn's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not necessary. Oh, but I insist. After all, if he's going to be in Emma and Jake's lives, I should know him, don't you think? I smiled sweetly. Why don't you give him a call right now? I'll wait. He's very busy right now. With his divorce and everything. I'm sure he can make time for dinner. Unless. I tilted my head. Unless there's some reason you don't want me to meet him. Brooklyn stood up abruptly, clutching her folder of papers. I need to go check on the children. They're napping, I said. I checked when I came in. She backed toward the stairs, her face flushed. I should start dinner. No need. I'm cooking tonight. I thought I'd make David's favorite pot roast with those little potatoes he loved. I watched her face crumple at the mention of my son. You remember that dish, don't you? He always said it reminded him of being a little boy. Brooklyn practically ran up the stairs, her folder clutched against her chest like armor. I heard her bedroom door slam shut. Then the muffled sound of her voice on the phone. I walked to the kitchen and started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. In a few days, James Morrison would start providing me with answers. Patricia Chun would begin building a case. And Brooklyn would discover that the grieving widow she thought she could manipulate had teeth. From upstairs, I could hear Brooklyn's voice getting more agitated, though I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like Uncle Ryan wasn't taking her calls. I smiled as I began peeling potatoes. The trap was closing and Brooklyn was starting to realize she was caught inside it. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd hired James Morrison. Brooklyn was upstairs screaming at someone on the phone, presumably Ryan, who hadn't returned any of her calls since our conversation about dinner. I could hear Diane trying to calm her down while the children ate breakfast in uncomfortable silence. I took the envelope to Harold's old study, the one room in the house that Brooklyn hadn't completely claimed yet. Inside were photographs, documents, and a typed report that made my hands shake as I read it. Ryan Michaels, married for 16 years to Susan Michaels, father of 3 teenage children, owner of a small construction company that was barely staying afloat. And according to the financial records James had somehow obtained, Ryan was in even worse financial shape than Brooklyn. The photographs were devastating. Brooklyn and Ryan at the casino, both of them laughing and drinking while placing bets that cost more than most people made in a week. Brooklyn at Ryan's apartment, not a house, an apartment on multiple occasions when David was at work. Ryan picking up Emma and Jake from school, taking them to his place while Brooklyn went shopping with credit cards that were already maxed out. But the worst discovery was in the medical records James had managed to access. The children's pediatric files, specifically their blood work from their last checkups. Emma and Jake weren't David's biological children. I read that line 3 times before it sank in. Neither child shared David's blood type. The genetic markers James had somehow obtained through a contact at the lab confirmed what the blood type suggested. There was no biological relationship between my son and the children he'd spent 8 years believing were his own. I sat in Harold's chair, staring at the report, feeling like the world had shifted beneath my feet. David had loved those children. He'd worked himself to exhaustion to provide for them, worried about their futures, planned their college funds. He died believing he was their father. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. "Grandma Phyllis?" Emma's voice was hesitant. I quickly closed the folder and opened the door. Emma stood there with Jake behind her, both of them looking worried. "Is Mommy okay?" Emma asked. "She's been crying a lot." I knelt down to their level, looking into their innocent faces. Whatever else was true, these children had done nothing wrong. They'd been caught in the middle of adult lies and manipulation, used as pawns in games they didn't understand. "Sometimes grown-ups get upset about things," I said carefully. "But that's not your fault, okay?" Jake stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around my neck. "I love you, Grandma Phyllis." The words hit me like a physical blow. This little boy, who wasn't my biological grandson but didn't know it, loved me. They both did. And I loved them back, had from the moment they were born. "I love you too, sweetheart. Both of you. Will you always be our grandma?" Emma asked. "Even if Mommy moves us away?" The question broke my heart. "Always," I promised. "No matter what happens, I will always love you both." That afternoon, while Brooklyn was locked in her room making increasingly desperate phone calls, I called James Morrison. "Mrs. Henderson, I was just about to call you. We've got more information. About the paternity? That, and about the gambling debt. It's not 50,000, Mrs. Henderson. It's closer to 80,000. And most of it's in both their names, Brooklyn and Ryan together." The number hit me like a slap. 80,000? Casino markers, high-interest loans, credit cards. They were living like they had money they didn't have, probably thinking they'd win it back eventually. James paused. "There's something else. Ryan's wife filed for divorce 3 days ago. She found out about the affair and the gambling. He's about to lose his house, his business, everything. What does that mean for Brooklyn? It means Uncle Ryan isn't coming to rescue her. He's got his own problems now, and from what I can tell, he's cutting all ties with Brooklyn to try to save his marriage and his finances." As if summoned by our conversation, Brooklyn appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Her face was puffy from crying, her usually perfect hair disheveled. She looked like a woman watching her world collapse. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice hoarse. I told James I'd call him back and hung up the phone. "What is it, Brooklyn?" She sat down heavily on the couch, her hands shaking as she lit a cigarette, a habit I'd never seen her indulge in before. "I need money." "For what?" "I can't tell you for what. I just need it. A lot of it." I sat across from her, studying her face. The mask was completely gone now. No more fake smiles, no more pretense of caring about anyone but herself. "How much is a lot?" 50,000. She took a deep drag of her cigarette. "I can pay you back." "With what money?" "I'll figure it out. I always do." I leaned back in my chair. "Brooklyn, I know about Ryan." Her cigarette froze halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "I know about the affair. I know about the gambling. I know about the debt. I watched her face crumble as each revelation hit. I know all of it. You don't understand. I understand that you cheated on my son for years. I understand that you gambled away money that should have gone to your children's future. I understand that you've been lying to me since the day you walked into this house. Brooklyn's hands were shaking so hard she dropped her cigarette. You can't prove any of that. I walked to Harold's desk and pulled out the folder James had given me. Actually, I can. Her face went white as I spread the photographs across the coffee table. Brooklyn and Ryan at the casino. Brooklyn at Ryan's apartment. Financial records showing the extent of their debt. Oh God, she whispered. There's more. I pulled out the medical records. Emma and Jake aren't David's children, are they? Brooklyn's composure finally shattered completely. She collapsed forward, her face in her hands, sobbing with the kind of desperation that comes from having no options left. How long have you known? I asked. Since before Jake was born, she said through her tears. David and I were having problems. Ryan and I. It just happened. For 4 years, you let my son believe those children were his. David was a good father to them. Brooklyn looked up, her face streaked with mascara. He loved them. I never meant for it to go on so long. But then David was so happy, and the children loved him, and I thought, you thought you could have it all. A husband to pay the bills and a boyfriend for excitement. Brooklyn wiped her nose with the back of her hand. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Ryan was going to leave his wife. We were going to be together. The gambling was just supposed to be fun. Something to do while we waited. And now Ryan's cutting you off to save his own marriage. She nodded miserably. He won't take my calls. His lawyer sent me a letter saying if I contact him again, they'll file harassment charges. I looked at this woman who had destroyed my son's life, who had built her entire existence on lies and manipulation. A week ago I might have felt sorry for her. Now I just felt tired. What happens to the children, Brooklyn? I don't know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I can't take care of them. Not with the debt, not without Ryan. I thought maybe. Maybe what? Maybe you'd want them. You love them, I know you do. And they love you. The audacity of it took my breath away. You want me to raise your children while you run away from your problems. They're not just my children. Brooklyn's voice turned sharp, desperate. They loved David like a father. They're part of this family, even if they're not blood. She was right about that, and we both knew it. Emma and Jake were innocent victims in all of this. They'd lost the only father they'd ever known. And now they were about to lose their stability too. What about the debt? I asked. That's my problem. I'll figure it out. $80,000 is not something you just figure out, Brooklyn. Her head snapped up. How did you know it was $80,000? I gathered the papers back into the folder. I know a lot of things, Brooklyn. More than you realize. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant when she realized that the helpless old woman she'd planned to manipulate had outmaneuvered her completely. What do you want? She asked finally. I want you gone. Out of my house, out of my life, out of those children's lives before you destroy them the way you destroyed David. And if I go? Then we'll see what kind of arrangements can be made for Emma and Jake. Brooklyn stood up slowly, swaying slightly like she was drunk. You can't keep them from me. I'm their mother. A mother who's $80,000 in debt to dangerous people. A mother who can't provide a stable home. A mother who's about to lose custody anyway when social services finds out about your situation. The threat hung in the air between us. Brooklyn knew I was right. She couldn't fight me legally, financially, or morally. She had no weapons left. I need time, she said. You have until tomorrow morning. That's not enough time to. Brooklyn. I stood up, and for the first time since she'd arrived, I felt like I had control of my own home again. Tomorrow morning, or I call social services myself. Your choice. She nodded shakily and walked toward the stairs. At the bottom step she turned back. They really do love you, she said. Emma and Jake. That wasn't part of the plan, but it's true. I know, I said. That's the only reason you're getting a choice about how this ends. As she climbed the stairs, I heard Diane's voice from the upstairs hallway, sharp and worried. They'd be making plans now, trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage Brooklyn had created. But it was too late for plans. The truth was out, and tomorrow would bring the reckoning that was 24 hours overdue. They left at dawn. I watched from my bedroom window as Brooklyn and Diane loaded suitcases into a taxi, moving quietly to avoid waking the children. Brooklyn looked up at the house once, her face pale in the early morning light, but she didn't wave. She didn't look back again. Emma and Jake were still asleep in what had been Emma's room. I'd spent most of the night sitting between their beds, watching them breathe, thinking about the conversation I'd had with Brooklyn after dinner. "What did you tell them?" I'd asked as she packed her belongings. "That we're going on a trip. That they'll stay with you for a while." Brooklyn folded a silk blouse with shaking hands. I couldn't explain the rest. "They'll need to know eventually. You tell them. When they're older. When they can understand." She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You'll be better at explaining it than I would be anyway." Now, as the taxi disappeared down the street, I realized that Emma and Jake would wake up to find their mother gone without a real goodbye. The cruelty of it made my chest tight, but I also knew it was probably easier this way. Brooklyn had never been good at difficult conversations. I made pancakes, the kind with chocolate chips that David used to love when he was their age. When Emma appeared in the kitchen rubbing her eyes, the first thing she said was, "Where's Mommy?" "She had to go take care of some grown-up business," I said, flipping pancakes with forced calm. "She asked me to take care of you while she's gone." "How long will she be gone?" Jake asked, climbing onto his chair at the kitchen table. I set plates in front of them, these children who weren't my biological grandchildren but who felt like mine anyway. "I don't know, sweetheart. But you're safe here with me for as long as you need to be." Emma picked at her pancakes. "Is Mommy coming back?" The question I'd been dreading. I sat down across from them, looking into their faces, David's eyes in Emma, his stubborn chin in Jake, even though genetics said otherwise. Love, I realized, had nothing to do with DNA. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know that I love you both very much, and this is your home for as long as you want it to be." Jake reached across the table and patted my hand with his sticky fingers. "Don't be sad, Grandma. We'll take care of you." That afternoon, while the children napped, I called Patricia Chun. "The custody petition is already prepared," she told me. "With Brooklyn gone and the evidence we have about her situation, it should be straightforward. The court will want to verify that you can provide a stable home, but given your financial situation and the children's attachment to you, I don't anticipate any problems." "What about Brooklyn? What if she changes her mind and comes back?" "She'd have to prove she's addressed the gambling addiction, the debt, and can provide a stable home. Given that she's essentially fled the state to avoid her creditors, that's going to be very difficult." I thought about Brooklyn and Diane, probably in some cheap motel room somewhere, trying to figure out their next move. Part of me wondered if I should feel guilty for destroying their lives so thoroughly. But then I remembered David working himself sick, remembered the lies, remembered Emma innocently talking about Uncle Ryan while her father worked late to pay for another man's children. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "I've been in touch with Ryan Michael's attorney. He's willing to sign away any parental rights to avoid having his name associated with this situation. His wife is demanding it as part of their reconciliation." So Ryan was abandoning Emma and Jake too, just like he'd abandoned Brooklyn when things got complicated. These children would grow up knowing that their biological father had chosen his own convenience over their welfare. "Patricia, I want to make sure they're protected. Financially, I mean. I want to set up trust funds, college accounts, whatever they'll need. Of course, we can structure it so that even if something happens to you, they'll be taken care of." That evening, I sat Emma and Jake down in the living room. I'd rehung some of the family photos Brooklyn had banished to the basement, and the walls looked more like home again. "I want to talk to you about something important," I said. "You know how your daddy was my son?" They nodded solemnly. "Well, even though your mommy had to go away, you're still my grandchildren. You'll always be my grandchildren, no matter what happens." "Even if Mommy doesn't come back?" Emma asked. "Even then." Jake climbed into my lap. "Will you be our mommy now?" The question broke my heart and healed it at the same time. "I'll be your grandma who takes care of you. Is that okay?" Both children nodded and Emma crawled over to join our hug. We sat there on the couch, These two children who'd lost so much and this old woman who'd found an unexpected second chance at motherhood. 6 months later, the custody papers were final. Brooklyn had never responded to the court notices, and her lawyer eventually withdrew from the case when she stopped paying his fees. Ryan had signed away his rights as requested, probably grateful to close that chapter of his life. The children had adjusted better than I'd expected. Emma was thriving in 2nd grade, and Jake had made friends at his new preschool. They still asked about their mother sometimes, but less frequently as time went on. I'd kept my promise to tell them the truth when they were older, but for now they just needed stability and love. I'd also kept my promise to myself. The house felt like home again, filled with children's laughter and the chaos of daily life. I'd hired Maria back, not just for cleaning but to help with the children when I needed it. She'd cried when I called her, and even more when I explained about Emma and Jake. On a crisp October morning, almost 8 months after Brooklyn had first appeared at my door, I was making breakfast when the phone rang. Emma answered it in the living room. "Grandma, it's for you," she called. "It's a lady." I took the phone expecting a telemarketer. Instead, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Mom." Brooklyn's voice was thin, tentative. "It's me." I felt my chest tighten but my voice stayed steady. "Brooklyn. I wanted to call. To see how the kids are doing." "They're fine. They're happy." A long pause. "I'm in Arizona. I got a job. In a hotel. It's not much but it's honest work." "That's good. I've been going to meetings. For the gambling. It's been 6 months since I placed a bet." I didn't respond. I'd heard promises from Brooklyn before. "I know I can't undo what I did," she continued. "To David, to the kids, to you. I know that. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to get better." "Why are you calling, Brooklyn?" Another pause. "I miss them. Emma and Jake. I know I don't deserve to miss them, but I do." I looked toward the living room where Emma was helping Jake with a puzzle, both of them chattering happily. They'd built a life here, a routine, a sense of security they'd never had with Brooklyn. "They're settled here," I said. "They're happy. They feel safe." I know you're better for them than I ever was." Her voice cracked. Could you tell them that I love them? That leaving them was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I knew it was right. I thought about all the anger I'd carried, all the pain Brooklyn had caused. But listening to her now, I heard something I'd never heard before: genuine remorse. "I'll tell them," I said. "Thank you." She was crying now. "And Mom? Thank you for loving them when I couldn't figure out how." After she hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, looking out at the backyard where Harold had planned to build a swing set before he got sick. Next spring I decided I'd have one installed for Emma and Jake. "Grandma." Emma appeared in the doorway. "Who was on the phone?" I turned and looked at this child who'd been through so much but still smiled every morning when she woke up. "Just someone who wanted to make sure you and Jake are happy." "We are happy," she said matter-of-factly. "This is our home now." "Yes," I said, pulling her into a hug. "This is your home now." That afternoon, while the children played in the backyard, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and thought about the strange turns life could take. A year ago, I'd been a traditional grandmother, seeing my grandchildren on holidays and special occasions. Now I was a full-time parent again at 65, raising children who weren't biologically mine but who felt like the most natural thing in the world. I thought about David, about the father he'd been to these children who weren't his blood. He'd loved them completely, without reservation, just as I did now. Maybe that was his final gift to me. The chance to love them the way he had, unconditionally and without limits. Brooklyn had been right about one thing. Emma and Jake were part of this family, blood or no blood. They always had been, from the moment David brought them home as babies and called me to tell me I was a grandmother. The sun was setting behind the oak tree Harold had planted when we first moved to this house. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: parent-teacher conferences, birthday parties, scraped knees and hurt feelings, and all the beautiful chaos of raising children. But tonight, Emma and Jake were safe in their beds, their future secured, their home certain. And I was exactly where I belonged, not the widow I'd expected to become, but the mother and grandmother I'd chosen to be. In the end, that choice had set all of us free.